Samana is an experience for you to question success as it's been traditionally defined. You might be doing well on paper and still feel like your life is a blur, or you're living intentionally and wonder why you're not seeing success. On Samana, we sit down with top CEOs, board members, and executives from companies you know and love to explore what success looks like up close and what it takes to build a life that feels just as fulfilling. The word samana comes from ancient times, referring to those who stepped away from the mainstream to pursue an ideal higher than themselves. On this podcast, we get to know modern-day samanas, individuals who've built success and paused to live with greater intention. I'm introducing your host, Anant Vijay. Each episode, Anant sits with guests who have reached the top 1% of their career while building a life founded on meaning. Welcome to Samana.
Well, Taz, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation because your work touches on themes we don't always get to hear about, big systemic challenges that have shaped entire countries and communities. You've spent a good chunk of your career at the intersection of public service and global development, working with institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. You've also led Malawi's investment corporation, and now you're driving programs at the MasterCard Foundation. Now, not a lot of people are lucky enough to get, sort of those experiences across the spectrum of their careers, and you've seen both sides of the equation. To kick us off, could you just take us through your journey in your own words, how you moved from one chapter to the next so we can get a better understanding of where you started, and would love to hear about your early days in your career and how it shaped out.
Great, thanks, Anant, and thank you for this opportunity. This is wonderful. The way I think about my career is in three phases, really. So, initially at Bain, really, which was my first job. So that first period of my career was, the analytics, the really management consulting, the problem solving, and it was a great time. It was a great foundation for a young person straight out of college. Then I had a second phase of my career, which was more in public finance, really public finance, economic policy making, and with a particular special focus on infrastructure finance. And that indeed was the time I spent at the National Treasury in South Africa, and then on to the global international institutions. And then the more recent phase has been in philanthropic capital, including what we term impact investing. So it's been quite a ride.
I can certainly imagine that. When you at first stepped onto the Harvard campus or walked into your first Bain office, was there a moment there where you felt like I've made it, and how long did that feeling last for you before it sort of morphed into something else?
Well, I don't know if I ever felt like I've made it. You always try to figure out what does it mean to make it. But clearly, great excitement at the outset. Going to Harvard was my first time to the US, and so there was so much of realigning expectations. But it was also a great privilege, I would say, to be amidst all these dynamic, very motivated, highly motivated, smart people. And same sense of excitement and being energized at Bain, very similar type of group, So it's been quite a privilege.
That's great. Uh, Many young consultants want to sort of drive impact in areas that are, close to them. They want to, but they don't know what problem necessarily to devote their lives to. And where did you start sort of feeling intellectually equipped to start working on these enormous infrastructural problems? You were working at the country level at Malawi and also other parts in Africa. How do you how would you advise someone to know that they're intellectually equipped to sort of make that jump? And when did you feel like you were intellectually equipped?
I think the time in college was very important because I did take several courses in economic development, both at Harvard College, but also at the Kennedy School. So that began to build my interest and my passion for economic development, for trying to understand and grapple with the issues of how do certain countries do better? How do certain countries accelerate in terms of their growth? But even after that experience, I still felt I didn't quite have a good handle on the issues because, by definition, economic growth and development are very, very complex and very contextual. So I went to grad school. Um, and in grad school, I focused exclusively on economic development. So, really trying to deep dive into the issues. I think coming out of grad school with that foundation now, and maybe with more sophisticated technical tools at my fingertips, I then felt that intellectually I was now ready to kind of get into this professionally. And that's when I started out at the World Bank.
And that's great. You've obviously had sort of you were able to see how the world looks like from a World Bank perspective, and now you've sort of seen it how it looks from a purely philanthropic perspective. How should someone younger think about the opportunity cost of grad school? What did you think about when you were sort of going in there?
Very good question. And I'll just mention that several members of my family, including my dad and my elder brother, have got doctorates. So there was always this pressure on not only should you go to grad school, you should get a PhD. And my wife also has a doctorate, right? So I'm surrounded by all these doctor people. So I would say for myself, I really felt that at a minimum, getting a first master's degree was quite important. And I do think for the types of issues we're talking about, you do want to spend a significant amount of time delving into the literature and grappling with these very complex problems, as I've already said. In terms of the trade-off, as you said, I think young young as I was, by which I mean kind of mid to late 20s, it's not a match of a sacrifice to go and spend 1, 2, even 3 years in grad school. I would strongly encourage a young person to go and spend that time. It's very career defining, I think, intellectually, and it's time well spent. So it's worthwhile. I would say, like I did, spend a few years out of college, getting to know the workplace, getting to know what it is like being in work. So in my case, that was at Bain. But then, yes, going back to grad school, be it a business school or another professional school, is something I would encourage.
Absolutely, and this is a question that many people struggle with today. So I'm happy to get that insight from you. And let's fast forward a little bit. So having grown up in Malawi, but seeing disparity across the world now through your work at the World Bank, at the IMF, and now at MasterCard Foundation, how do you personally decide sort of what problems you want to tackle and geographies where there's so many meaningful issues to contribute to? How do you narrow down your focus there?
Sometimes it is very much a matter of circumstance, right? So, and I think one should be open to that, particularly when you're early on in your career. And I would say being open to the possibilities. You might, for example, go and volunteer in a UN organization, or indeed work for one of the global institutions or for an international NGO. Really be open to the possibilities. What might be more defining, perhaps, would be, the geography and the sector. you might have opportunity to choose those kinds of things. But once you get into that sector, into that country, particularly if it's an emerging market, then you'll probably have your hands full, right? You'll be asked to tackle all manner of things. In my case, I happened to be at the National Treasury in South Africa after the World Bank, and infrastructure and public-private partnerships was something that was important at the time. Building urban infrastructure, including rail and roads, housing, clean water, electricity, really to build the productive capacity of the economy of the country and then to spur growth. That was what mattered at that time. And we were trying to find out how we could do that in innovative ways by bringing together the public and the private sector. But in a sense, I didn't choose that particular problem. What I chose was the geography and the sector. And then, those issues were the pressing problem of the day in that country.
Understood. And that's really interesting because, of all the professional colleagues that I've spoken with, a lot of them are very scared to commit to a very specific sector or geography. They feel like it'll narrow their focus too much and it may close some doors. I think people have this, idea that I don't want doors closed. From your perspective, just from this door closing analogy, do you feel like it's important to close some doors, or do you feel like despite choosing a sector and a geography, your doors have remained relatively open? Or, how would you advise people who are afraid of closing their doors?
I would say the doors never really close. By picking a geography and a sector and possibly doing a deep dive into that particular sector, you are able to really grapple with complex problems in the true sense of coming up with durable solutions, as opposed to, say, an approach where you're hopping around different sectors, different industries, as sometimes we do in consulting, in management consulting. So my experience and my takeaway was dive deep in a sector, in my case, infrastructure finance and PPPs, really get to learn what it means to deliver solutions and implement solutions in practice. And then when you step back from that, you will always find that other new doors will open, because in those other instances, they will be looking for those deep, deep insights. And indeed, my own experience was I started with consulting. I went into a particular sector, which I've mentioned was infrastructure, but then was able to step back and go back into consulting with a firm called Genesis Analytics in South Africa. So I don't think those doors ever close, and certainly not permanently.
That's great because a lot of consultants obviously struggle with this. It sometimes feel like I can do consulting. It'll give me another 3 to 4 years of, optionality. I don't have to commit to anything. I can do some work in retail, maybe, industrials, maybe financial services. So you never really truly commit. And I think our brains are probably just wired that way. However, I would love to actually hear about your work with the Malawi Agriculture Industrial Investment Corporation. Infrastructure finance is a massive need. And what were your priorities when you were leading the company as CEO?
So at the time this opportunity arose, I was based in the US. I was based in Washington, D.C. And on a visit home to Malawi, I saw an advert and I thought, wow, this is really cool, right? I mean, an opportunity to come back home and lead this institution. And so I applied and went through the process. And sure enough, a couple of months later, I was on a plane with family and all, and back at this institution. I was really the first member of staff, so we built the institution, and it was so fulfilling and so exciting to be at a kind of, let's call it, mid-career level and be able to do something so new and potentially, so impactful for a country like Malawi. The context, of course, being not enough capital comes into Malawi and indeed into sub-Saharan Africa, and certainly not patient capital. So this institution, this National Development Finance Corporation that we set up, was trying to mobilize regional and international investors, de-risk the project pipeline for them in a range of sectors, but big focus on agriculture, and then co-invest alongside these external investors. So it was a great time in my career, and I believe we managed to build a successful institution that till this day is continuing to grow and to flourish.
That's incredible, and you're right. Very rarely people have that opportunity to do that in their career. Um, what's it really interesting also about that is you said you applied, you saw an advertisement for the role, and you applied, and sometimes it doesn't harm to just sort of put your name in the hat for that opportunity and look at sort of what it was what it allowed you to do. I'm curious, did you ever feel like your work at the IMF set you up well for that opportunity? And what were some skill sets that you sort of translated from the IMF? And what were some new skills you had to develop coming into such a novel new role?
My time at the IMF was equally interesting, equally challenging, and what stands out for me as a senior economist at the IMF was just the breadth and diversity of exposure. So in my time there, my kind of 4 years there, I worked across a dozen countries, at least a dozen countries, in the Caribbean, in Eastern Europe, in South Asia, in East Asia, and of course in Sub-Saharan Africa. So number one, being able to navigate different cultures and different institutional landscapes was important. Secondly, as a mission chief or mission lead, we led teams, small teams, to these different countries to help understand the particular public finance challenges they were facing. And almost invariably, on the first day, you'd arrive and you'd be meeting with the Minister of Finance or the Deputy Minister of Finance. So being able to interact at that very senior national level on issues of critical importance to the country, and then rapidly, in a fairly short period of time, in a couple of weeks, come up with a reform strategy and a reform pathway for that country. These are valuable skills, but I would also add that my time at Bain, much earlier in my career, also helped me with that ability to survey the landscape, crunch through a ton of data, and then distill it into this reform pathway. So bringing that ability to prioritize quickly, that's from the earlier time and as a consultant, but now bringing that together with the skills of an economist, I think that came together very nicely at the IMF.
That's incredible. And I would love to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of those experiences. What did you learn from your work across both public and private sectors? And what were some of the biggest reasons that you saw good ideas sort of take hold and then eventually fizzle out? And how did you sort of get around some of those challenges?
Amongst the lessons that I might touch upon, without a doubt, I think it really does center on leadership. That came across very strongly for me during my time in the public sector in South Africa, where the Ministry of Finance was led by Trevor Manuel, who was a really great intellect, but also just a great people's person. And he was able to galvanize this fairly small team of technocrats to address a range of socioeconomic problems through public financial management, through the budget, and his leadership was really exemplary. So saw that in the public sector, and I think the same would be true in the private sector. I think everything really starts there. The next lesson I would say is having really good quality information upon which to make decisions, whether you're in the public or in the private sector. We're oftentimes having to make decisions that are going to be important for people's lives. In the private sector, it might be about the restructuring of a company, it might be the direction of a company, and that's surely going to impact the lives of those employees and customers, clients. In the public sector, it might be literally about the social benefits that disadvantaged communities have access to. It might be whether or not we should be giving a subsidy in a particular area. It might be about cutting the budget deficit, for example, reducing our spending in order to build economic resilience. All of these decisions, very difficult decisions, require access to good information, and ultimately, and this is the third and kind of maybe final one that I'll put on the table, finally, it's about our accountability as, public office bearers or leaders in private firms, accountability to our customers, to our employees, and then in the public sector, accountability to the people we serve, to the citizens. Those are the three big things that I took away. And if I look now at the space I'm in, economic development, social impact, I think governance and accountability are what ultimately allow us to deliver those technical solutions that as consultants we learned to hone, right? We built up this technical toolkit as consultants, which helped us get to the answer, right? And you'll recall at Bain, we often spoke of answer first. So we became very good at coming up with the answer, the technical solution. But to deliver that into meaningful impact and change, then we really need to look at leadership and accountability to our core constituency.
You mentioned some great leaders that you had worked with at the IMF. You yourself were leading the Malawi Agriculture Industrial Investment Corp. There must have been lessons that you sort of took away from some of the leaders that you worked in early in your career. And for all the people that are listening who will eventually go on to either lead companies or start companies, what are some incredible traits that you saw in these people who were able to both, bring people together and also create change? And, what is advice that you would give to them around leadership that you've both experienced personally and the people you've worked with?
Thank you for that. I'd like to maybe mention 2 or 3 leaders that come to mind immediately. I've already mentioned Minister Trevor Manuel, who was a great inspiration. And I always say when I grow up, I want to be like him. Other leaders who've been really impactful. My immediate manager at the National Treasury, Lisecha Kanyaho, he's now the governor of the central bank. He is what I would consider a fearless leader. If you look at that country, South Africa, they've gone through some very difficult transitions. And as the head of the Treasury and later head of the Reserve Bank, there's very difficult trade-off decisions that had to be made. Some decisions would push the country into a more populist direction, and others would push it into a more sustainable direction. And very, very difficult trade-off. And in all of these difficult decisions, Mr. Kanyaho, Governor Kanyaho, has been fearless, but also willing to in a sense tell the truth about these trade-offs. And so I think that trait of being courageous is really important. Another leader I would highlight is the head of the MasterCard Foundation, Rita Roy, who in many ways would be really quite different from the gentleman I just mentioned. Much more quiet form of leadership. But what I've learned deeply from Rita Roy was this strong commitment to listening. And in all her major engagements, she's dedicated to listening to other people around her and truly understanding the nature of what they're facing at that time before rushing to a solution. I referenced our sort of focus on getting quickly to the technical solution, particularly as management consultants. And yet that form of leadership demands listening, understanding, and slowing down. So those are two different styles of leadership, but have been very impactful during my career.
It's incredible because it's rare to hear about two different leaders and how they've sort of made both a positive impact on your own personal leadership style. And I think as people are younger, we're still trying to find our style, but we can only emulate what we know. So it's incredible that you were able to sort of see different styles and how they work and in which context they work best in. And as people listen to this and they heard you say some incredible things around the fact that you were able to not just drive impact, but you also felt fulfilled running the Malawi Investment Corporation. Are there any really interesting focus areas that you would encourage, I guess, younger consultants and entrepreneurs to encourage them to explore past the US? Are there any economic models that are currently broken around the world that have the potential to be changed or to flourish?
What comes to mind, again, from my time at the Malawi Agricultural Investment Corporation, but indeed also during my time at the MasterCard Foundation, is this move towards what we call blended finance. And at its simplest, it really it recognizes the need to crowd in capital to unlock opportunity for communities, right? So it might be, for example, it might be in agriculture where, as we have here in Malawi, we've got many smallholder farmers, and quite frankly, on the face of it, they're not considered quote unquote bankable, right? On the face of it. But if you're able to bring to bear, good technical assistance, capacity building, some grant funding, together with commercial capital, and maybe some credit enhancement, right? Some guarantees. If you're able to bring this kind of package of solutions, then what you're able to do is take a community or a segment that is viewed risky and that fails to attract capital and take them on this journey where you de-risk them, and through that journey, different pools of capital will be attracted. So initially, indeed, as you're doing that capacity building and training, it might be more grant funding. But as this community, as you build their productive capacity, then you do want to bring in some debt, some concessional debt initially, and eventually, once that little business or operation grows and scales, you might even want to bring in some equity. So that's the one model that I've worked with and grappled with around a blended finance. And then the other one I would quickly also point to is, and this is more in the space of infrastructure finance, where I've spent many, many years, is public-private partnerships, where we're trying to bring, if you will, the best of the private sector to help the public sector solve certain infrastructure-related problems. And in those instances, the public sector might just bring land to the table or some other form of support, but the delivery and problem solving, if you will, including capital, comes from the private sector. So this PPP model has been around since the early 90s, but in a sense is struggling at the moment, and a number of advanced countries are pulling away from it, but emerging markets, developing countries still find this a relevant model. So we need more work to think about how to make it more relevant and more successful in the emerging market context.
That's fantastic. And I think many people don't have that view when they're looking at, solving a broken economic models. But it's really interesting to hear from your perspective. And, you've been CEO of the Malawi Agriculture Investment Corp. Is it true that being part of the C-suite is something that young consultants should strive for if they're trying to optimize for impact? Is it is impact and purpose generally blended with the title, or is it a function of what you make of the experience? Maybe you've interacted with other C-suite leaders who've had a tough time in their role and maybe wouldn't opt to do it the same way again, but perhaps in a different way.
My experience is you can have real impact, meaningful impact from anywhere within the organization. Sometimes being the analyst who is running the model, say, and then bringing those insights up to the leaders, to the team leaders, that can be really, really meaningful. I mentioned, for example, my time at the IMF where I was leading these teams, and oftentimes you go into a country with, if you will, a model of sorts, and you're having to figure out what are the trade-offs. And there, it might be the middle level economist, the senior economist, who's then driving ultimately the results that go to the top. So that's an encouragement to say wherever you are, you can indeed have impact. However, and this is certainly from my time at the Malawi Investment Corporation, being the managing director, being the sort of the captain of the ship, if you are, does give you certain levers that you can pull that others cannot, and it does also give you access to political leadership as well. And so at some point in your career, given the opportunity, I would say, yes, rise up to the challenge, run an organization, and that will give you the opportunity to make those difficult decisions, those difficult trade-offs, which ultimately impact people's lives, as we said before. Mind you, that doesn't have to be a large organization, right? Like the IMF or the World Bank. It might be a small NGO. It might even be, for that matter, it might be a family business, right? In our context here in emerging markets, it is small family businesses that over the years, over 20, 30 years, have grown, expanded, and have become regional powerhouses. And so the opportunity to be in that leading situation, to be in the driving seat, is something that has been wonderful for me to experience, and I would also encourage others if given the opportunity.
And did you feel ready for your role as CEO? How did that experience sort of shape how you led in the future? And I guess, you applied for the role, but were there any misunderstandings about how you were going to lead this? And then eventually, once you started leading it, how did things change for you personally?
I think I believed I was ready for the role, right? But when I got in there and we got busy and I hired the team, it dawned upon me that there were some skill sets that needed to be developed. And I think that would be true for most leaders. So, number one, I've already alluded to earlier, this skill and ability to truly listen, um, incorporate what different members of the team are saying. Yes, it is true that ultimately the buck stops with you as the CEO or the MD, but I think in that role I could have been a better listener. I think that's really important. I was also, I think it's fair to say I was very tough on the team, you know. I kind of, maybe because I'd come from this bigger global institution, I was now setting up this national institution, and I set the bar really high, and I was driving the team very strongly to that. Setting the bar high in terms of performance and goals, I think that's a good thing. I think we should always set the bar high, but we should be more thoughtful about the pace of ultimately getting there and where we find our team in terms of their skill set, in terms of their pace, and in terms of the tools that they have. And so, as I say, I was very tough on the team. I pushed the team really hard. That helped us to get to I think, a successful organization. But I do wonder that on a kind of people's level, if I shouldn't have been more patient, more thoughtful, and ultimately invested more time in building up people's skills. I think that's part of being a leader, right? It's not only selecting the team and then driving them to results, but also helping them in their own professional journey. And I think I could have done a much better job of that.
And that's really interesting because I've actually heard that from a couple different leaders how they were tough on their teams and they had to rein in a little bit. You know, when you were working at Bain, obviously you're surrounded by incredibly intelligent people, and surprisingly, a lot of these people end up having imposter syndrome. They don't feel like they're good enough. Where did you sort of get the confidence to be like, I'm going to go and apply for the role as CEO and we'll figure it out, when I start. And what would you advise to younger people who are sort of facing that struggle of perhaps I'm not good enough, perhaps there's someone better than me out there to lead this organization?
Me, I think that confidence and the resilience it takes to step into those kinds of challenging roles, for me, that came from my family, I would say. As I mentioned at the outset, I have high achievers within my family. My parents, my mom and dad, my brothers have all done really, really well in their respective roles. And my wife is a leader in her space. And as I mentioned to you, they're all running around with doctorates, and I don't have one, but I can still kind of hold my own at the dinner table, right? So that family foundation and encouragement gave me great, great confidence, I would say, and has stood me well throughout my career. In addition to that, I did go to business school at some point as part of rounding up my professional training. That too gave me great confidence. Having an MBA from a leading school, I was at INSEAD, where once again you're now engaging with business leaders in a very fast-paced environment and being given this kind of broad exposure to how businesses work and how business leaders think, but really also importantly the kind of organizational behavior training that you get in leadership, in managing teams. So the MBA and that experience also gave me the tools needed to get to work in this leadership role.
That's great. And it's you're obviously sitting around the dinner table with incredibly intelligent people. So, you obviously feel sometimes, I need to be able to keep up with these people. And one of the hardest parts about choosing an unconventional path in helping people around is getting people around you sort of on board to understand your vision. Did you ever have difficulty getting your friends and family on board with your perspective, with your work, and also be around the world so much and constantly traveling? And the reason I ask is because it's unfortunate, because there's so many people I know who don't pursue an opportunity like this because they don't want to explain it to their family that they're going to be traveling a lot, they're going to be, making a lot of impact around the world. So they'd rather just take a role that's local, that pays well, and they can sort of live out their life doing that.
For me, the family, as I mentioned, has been very supportive, and indeed, there's been frequent travel, particularly at the IMF, but even when I was at the MasterCard Foundation, regular travel, right? Easily a dozen trips in a quarter or so. So the family's been very understanding, but I think that puts even greater responsibility on us to look after family and to try and remain in touch and not lose those important kind of moments with family. I think where I did struggle somewhat, I would say, was at the Malawi Agricultural Investment Corporation, and I kind of touched upon that, where I had this vision of us raising, a huge amount of capital to drive investments at scale. And in that context of a new institution, apart from bringing the team along, and remember it was a new, fairly young team, but also the shareholders. And in our case, we had a private sector shareholder, which was one of the top banks in the country, but also the government as a shareholder. And so working with these very different shareholders to drive a particular direction, that was challenging. I think that really stretched my skill set. And I hope we were able to advance the cause.
That's fair. And I wanted to ask because everybody wants to be altruistic, everybody wants to be philanthropic, but philanthropy is not easy. There's a lot of challenges that you have to tackle while also keeping sort of all of these parties aligned to the vision that you're trying to pursue. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced, whether that was at the Malawi Agriculture Investment Corp or MasterCard Foundation, or really anywhere else where philanthropy was starting to become difficult and you were trying to push forward, but you were having a hard time?
So philanthropic philanthropy, particularly in our context in Africa, in emerging markets, has a really important role to play. More so today, when traditional forms of development assistance or donor aid has been scaled back significantly. We know that. And the expectations are now that philanthropic capital would fill that gap where maybe traditional donors have stepped back. The challenge there is oftentimes with philanthropy, it's grants, right? It's pure grants. And the real tension you have there is, I'm going to write this check, right, which might be $10 million. It might be $100 million for some of the really big philanthropies, the big charitable organizations. The tension is, how can I then ensure performance? Now, the performance is going to be different from maybe the metrics that we would take if we were doing a traditional investment, where we're looking at ROE or ROI or some sort of financial performance. With philanthropic capital, it's all around impacting people's lives, creating jobs, sustainable livelihoods, financial inclusion, giving voice to people who do not have a voice. But if I'm writing this check, right, and handing it over directly to the community or to partners, how do I ensure that performance? And I do think that is still a big question for major philanthropies. And I do think the kinds of models around performance that we applied way back as management consultants, would be helpful in this context, right? Even where you're writing a check, right? Writing a check as a grant, there's still opportunity for risk sharing mechanisms with communities, with other partners. And there's also opportunities to sort of what has been called in some instances a kind of, when I see performance, you will get, if you will, an even bigger form of support. And that really comes from our training as economists, that ultimately you want to align incentives, even where you're giving a fairly big grant. And there's more work to be done there. And I would encourage young consultants who are looking to go into this space to work in philanthropy to bring their full toolkit around performance measurement and incentive alignment, so that those grants, those dollars, can go an extra mile and have an even bigger bang in terms of impacting people's lives.
That's amazing. Thank you for breaking that down so well. Where does your work take you next? What's the next arc in sort of driving impact, and what'll continue to drive that same level of meaning for you personally as both an operator and an investor?
I think in the very short term, I continue to do advisory work um, in different contexts across sub-Saharan Africa, but indeed in East Asia, in South Asia, and I enjoy that. I really enjoy going to work in these different environments and bringing these different models and experiences that I've accumulated to bear on difficult problems, and increasingly on those problems at their intersection of public and private, where we can use public assets together with private capital to drive investments and to drive impact at scale, always drive impact at scale. So I'll remain in this space, I think, for a while, and I do enjoy it very much. But ultimately, and maybe ironically, I see my career going where I started out sort of 30 odd years ago, when I was young, brazen, and uninhibited. And at that time, I really wanted to go into public service, at the highest level. And then what happens is, as you kind of go along and you start doing these things, you meander somewhat, and you want to go into I don't know, go into private equity or go into investment banking. But over the past 30 years, I think I'm coming back to full circle to say, in order to serve and to really, really impact people's lives and people who are kind of at the bottom of the pyramid in our context, that going into public office is important. It is challenging, maybe not financially rewarding, but I think that's where all these accumulated experiences would have their biggest impact. So I see myself continuing in the kind of advisory space for a while, but ultimately going into public office.
I can't wait to see where you head, because it's amazing how much change you've made both for the country and also globally in your previous roles. If you were to sit down with your 25-year-old self today, what are some lessons that you would tell them about, risk taking, opportunity seeking, and whether it is okay to just meander or have a more structured path?
I would encourage my younger self to to do many different varied things. And fortunately, I think my younger self did that to a certain extent. So varied experience, and getting out of your comfort zone, which I wish I had done more of. Getting out of your comfort zone and seeing many different things professionally. But having done that, and that will vary, that might be for 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years, then indeed, as we spoke earlier, finding a sector, finding a geography where you could spend more time and stick to that. I think that's something where I was always quick to move on. But there's something to be said about sticking with a problem, with a complex problem, and spending time with it and building your professional network and the ecosystem around that. But maybe most importantly, what I would say to my younger self is, never give up on those kind of, hopes and passions that you had as a very young person. Like, return to them often, and try to get back to them ultimately, because I think it's when we are young and brazen and kind of dreamers that we are right about what we should be doing as professionals and as people as well. And so that's what I would ask my younger self to do, to hold on to those early kind of ideals.
That's really great, Ted. And as we close out, I'd love to ask you some rapid fire questions that are great for us to know you even more personally than we have over the last hour. Are you ready for it? Okay, perfect. What's the best investment you've ever made, financial or otherwise?
Financial investments was right here in Malawi, in a bank that IPO'd recently and really outperformed fantastically. So, as a financial investment, you really can find some great deals in the emerging markets.
What's the worst investment you've made, either financially or otherwise?
Investments certainly was in really expensive wine. I am a bit of a red wine drinker, and some of these bottles will really set you back, many hundred bottles. And then sitting down and kind of, let me stop right there. Just that's a bad investment.
That's great. I think I'll have to get your advice on some of these wines in that case. What's a personal or professional moment that you think about frequently, more than most people would guess?
I think a lot about my time at the Treasury, and when I decided after business school to quit. And when I went to see, my then boss, Lisecha Kanyaho, he basically, wouldn't accept my resignation. And I stayed on with the organization for another 3 years. And in retrospect, that was really meaningful and transformational for my career. So sticking with it sometimes when you think you want to go off somewhere.
That's great. And if your name, resume, and bio disappeared from Google, what would you want your family or close friends to remember you for?
Hope they would remember me for really trying to bring meaning and impact to uh, people in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in this part of the world, that I worked really hard to bring solutions that would expand the opportunity set for vulnerable people and vulnerable communities in this part of the world.
What an incredible answer. Taz, that sort of brings me to the end of my rapid fire. Thank you for sharing your story with us. what I really took away from this conversation is, it's a reminder that impact is not just abstract, it's personal, but more than that, it requires deep conviction, even if the path feels a little uncertain. You've shown us through this podcast that what unconventional looks like from the outside, and you've left stability, you left places like Bain and the IMF and the World Bank, and you leaned into the hard problems. You moved between DC and Malawi, and how that choice to move meaningfully expanded your impact, and made it possible for Malawi to sort of flourish under some of the leadership roles that you had taken on in the Malawi Agriculture Foundation, the MasterCard Foundation. Thank you for your incredible perspective, and for the work that you continue to do to make a change. And I'm sincerely hoping that some of the younger consultants listening to this, I hope that some of their fears around taking a more unconventional path have been quelled, and they're able to sort of dive into it with more conviction now.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed this time with you. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
This video is presented by VJ Wealth and produced by AQ Productions.